You can't fish here! This is private property! Are you even listening to me?
Put that rod down right now. That's what the HOA president yelled across the dock at me, like I was waving around a shotgun instead of showing my son how to fish. Apparently, fishing poles now count as dangerous weapons, at least in her book. One moment I'm teaching my boy how to bait a hook, and the next I've got a $600 citation shoved in my face while neighbors live stream it like some budget reality show. And when she grabbed her phone to call 911, I knew right then it wasn't about fishing anymore. It was about control. Tell me in the comments if you've ever dealt with someone drunk on authority. That Saturday morning started off like any other. Noah had been begging me all week to teach him how to fish properly, and I finally had the time. The sun was rising over the lake, scattering golden ripples across the water. My son had his little tackle box arranged perfectly, every lure sorted by size and color. He was buzzing with excitement, barely able to contain himself. I was showing him how to cast when Noah suddenly pointed behind me, eyes wide. "Dad, who are those people?" I turned and saw a white golf cart barreling down the path like a SWAT team rolling up for a raid. The cart screeched to a stop 10 feet away, and 3 people jumped out with the kind of intensity you'd expect from paramedics. Leading the charge was Gloria Hale, our 55-year-old HOA president, her blonde hair perfectly styled, flanked by 2 neighbors who looked like her personal enforcement squad. One of them immediately pulled out his phone, live streaming us with the caption, "Catching a rule breaker in action." Comments were already popping up from other residents. "Excuse me," Gloria barked, her voice sharp enough to cut steel. "Are you Justin Bennett?" I nodded, baffled that she even knew my name, let alone why she was so furious about me fishing with my son. "I'm Gloria Hale, president of the Meadowbrook Homeowners Association, and you are in direct violation of community rules." She gestured toward me and Noah, as though we were fugitives who'd finally been cornered. With the swagger of someone who had never been told no, she marched toward us. "Do you even know what time it is, Mr. Bennett?" I glanced at my watch. "It's 7:30. Exactly. Her smirk made my stomach twist. "You're fishing during quiet hours. Before 8 a.m., that's a violation." Thinking it had to be a misunderstanding, I pulled out my valid state fishing license and held it out. She barely looked at it before dismissing it with a flick of her hand. "This isn't about state permits," she said coldly. "This is about community standards and respect for your neighbors." Her sidekick kept recording, narrating the whole thing like it was a live reality show about community enforcement. Then Gloria reached into her blazer and pulled out a crisp citation printed on fancy letterhead, like she'd been waiting for this moment. She handed it to me with a smug smile. "You are hereby fined $150 for quiet hour violation, plus $450 in legal processing and investigation fees." My eyes nearly popped at the $600 total. "This has to be a mistake," I said, scanning the paper again. $600 for fishing half an hour too early?" Her smirk only grew as she exchanged knowing looks with her cronies. "The fees are standard," she said. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before breaking the rules." Noah tugged on my sleeve, whispering, "Dad, are we in trouble?" The fear in his voice made my chest tighten. This was supposed to be a special morning, passing down a family tradition. Instead, we were being treated like criminals at the very lake our HOA fees maintain. Gloria noticed his unease but stayed stone cold. Then, in full dramatic fashion, she pulled out her phone and started dialing. "Since you refuse to comply, I'm calling the authorities," she announced loudly, making sure the live stream audience heard every word. I felt my blood pressure. "Spike! She was really calling 911 over this? Yes, I need to report a dangerous trespasser threatening residents and violating community rules at Meadowbrook Lake," she said into the phone, like she was narrating a crime drama. Noah's hands trembled. His fishing rod slipped from his grip and clattered against the dock, echoing in the heavy silence. I wrapped an arm around him, trying to stay calm, though inside I was fuming. If I ended up in handcuffs for teaching my son to fish, the local news would eat this story alive. The neighbor with the phone kept streaming, smugly saying things like, "This is what happens when people think they're above the rules." Gloria hung up with a satisfied smile. The police are on their way. I suggest you gather your equipment and prepare to explain yourself. My head spun. A calm morning had somehow turned into a nightmare. We just wanted to spend time by the water, but now 3 HOA reps stood watching us like we might bolt or hide evidence of some crime. Gloria checked her watch impatiently while the neighbor's live stream rolled on, documenting every second of our humiliation. Noah pressed against me and whispered, "Dad, are they going to take you away?" That broke me. This was the kind of memory that could scar him for years. I reassured him as best I could, though truthfully, I had no idea what would happen next. It felt surreal, like we had slipped into some alternate universe where teaching your child to fish was grounds for police intervention. And Gloria? She was clearly set on making me an example. How far was she willing to take this? Looking back now, I should have known this was only the beginning. The wail of sirens reached us before the patrol cars came into view. 2 officers stepped out, moving with the kind of alertness you'd expect if they were responding to an actual threat. One of them, an older man with graying hair and weary eyes, looked like he'd seen every kind of petty neighborhood feud imaginable. His partner looked barely out of training, bright-eyed, eager, and clearly ready to prove himself on what he assumed was a serious case. Gloria wasted no time rushing toward the officers, waving her citation like it was a critical piece of evidence in some major crime. "Officers, thank goodness you came," she exclaimed with dramatic relief. "This man has been trespassing on community grounds, breaking quiet hour rules and flatly refusing to comply with lawful HOA authority." She motioned toward Noah and me as if we were dangerous fugitives finally caught after a long chase. The officers approached, bracing for something serious, only to find an ordinary dad with a tackle box and a scared 12-year-old clutching a fishing pole. The younger cop instinctively reached for his cuffs without even reviewing our paperwork, apparently convinced that an arrest was the solution here. I wanted to object, but my mouth went dry when the metal glinted in the morning.
Light?
Noah saw his hand move toward the restraints and burst into tears, his sobs cutting through the air. "Please don't take my dad away," he cried, dropping his tackle box and scattering bright lures across the dock. That heartbreaking plea, a child begging not to see his father arrested for fishing, created exactly the kind of scene Gloria seemed intent on staging. My throat tightened as I watched Noah's hands tremble with fear, the morning unraveling into something far darker. "Then it should have been—" "Hold on," the older officer interrupted, raising a hand to halt his partner. He had noticed Noah's distress and seemed to be reassessing what was actually happening. "Let me get this straight," he said. "You were fishing in the community lake with a valid state license, but you started half an hour before HOA. Rules allow?" I nodded, grateful someone was finally applying reason. I handed over my license and ID, hoping clarity would replace chaos before this spiraled into an arrest. The senior officer studied them carefully while his younger partner kept a tense eye on us as if we might suddenly turn violent. "This license is valid and up to date," the older officer confirmed, comparing it against Gloria's citation. With clear doubt about the seriousness of her complaint, Gloria, undeterred, stepped forward confidently, ready with her defense. "Section 12.4 of our community guidelines forbids recreational lake use before 8 a.m. or after 9 p.m., she recited, as though she'd memorized the manual. "This rule exists to protect residents who work unusual schedules and depend on guaranteed quiet hours." She handed him a laminated copy for emphasis. Meanwhile, the younger officer still seemed convinced handcuffs were in order, touching his belt again despite his partner's hesitation. Gloria cut us off whenever we tried to explain, demanding an immediate arrest for what she labeled community disruption and illegal trespassing during quiet hours. Her frustration grew as the officers didn't instantly back her demands. Adding insult to injury, our humiliation was being live-streamed. A neighbor narrated the entire confrontation to his online audience, urging that rule breakers be punished. "Arrest him already," Gloria snapped when the officers continued, reviewing documents. "This man is violating our standards and must face consequences." The senior officer glanced around at the still water, the quiet morning, and the absence of any real disturbance. His expression betrayed doubt about the urgency of Gloria's so-called emergency. "Ma'am," he said, weary, "this neighborhood calls us more often than people order takeout." "Most of these reports are nothing," his partner admitted quietly. "We've had several false alarms from this HOA address." Relief washed over me. The truth was finally cutting through Gloria's theatrics. Still, the live-streaming neighbor kept narrating, insisting HOA enforcement was protecting community values. Online comments scrolled quickly, viewers split between support and outrage over whether this was real justice or absurd overreach. Gloria's agitation only grew. "I called 911 because this man was trespassing and ignoring lawful rules," she insisted, her voice edging into desperation. "And if residents can choose which rules to follow, the entire community structure falls apart." The younger officer reviewed Noah's gear and my license one last time before making his call. "Sir, your permits are valid," he said firmly. "Fishing here with a license isn't trespassing. This might be an HOA issue, but it's not criminal, and it doesn't warrant police involvement." Gloria's jaw dropped. As the officers prepared to leave, Noah stopped crying, his face streaked with tears, and whispered, "Dad, are we really okay?" I knelt to reassure him that we hadn't done anything wrong, though I could see the fear this left behind. What was supposed to be a calm morning lesson had turned into a nightmare encounter. Gloria still wasn't done. As the officers walked away, she shouted after them, "This is unacceptable! You're failing your duty if you let violators walk free!" T.E. Older officer turned back, irritation clear in his tone. "Ma'am, HOA disputes should be handled through civil channels, not emergency services." The live streamer finally ended his video, disappointed there'd been no dramatic arrest. A woman who had stayed silent the entire time simply shook her head and returned to her golf cart. Gloria stood there fuming, her carefully staged spectacle collapsing in front of her. As Noah and I headed home, he asked why Gloria had been so furious about fishing. I tried to explain HOA rules, though I didn't really understand it myself. The whole ordeal felt like an extreme overreaction, and I couldn't help sensing something more personal behind it. That night, I replayed the senior officer's remark about constant calls from our HOA and the mention of repeated false reports. If incidents like this were happening regularly, maybe there was a bigger pattern. I also couldn't stop thinking about Gloria's smug presentation of that $600 fine. It felt too deliberate, like she'd been waiting for the perfect chance to make an example out of someone. If she still thought she held the upper hand, maybe it was time to flip the whole board. Perhaps this debt could become my leverage. Later, while Rachel tucked Noah into bed, both still shaken, I sat in my office digging through public property records. Years in journalism had taught me how to uncover documents, and thanks to my grandmother's inheritance, I now had the financial breathing room to do something about it. Something told me Gloria's confidence wasn't just about enforcing rules. It was calculated, and I intended to find out why. The first thing I uncovered hit me like a punch to the gut. The lake management contract revealed 6 months' worth of missed payments. A pile of notices stamped in bold red "overdue," each one ignored, stacked up to a staggering $15,000. It was obvious to anyone paying attention that trouble was brewing beneath the calm surface of our quiet neighborhood. And the further I sifted through the HOA's financial records, the uglier the truth became. For months, Clearwater Lake Management had been sending certified warning letters. None of them had ever been shared with homeowners during the HOA's regular meetings. Gloria had deliberately kept the warnings hidden while continuing to collect dues from residents who believed their money was maintaining the lake and funding community services. I printed every document I could find, laying them out across my desk like puzzle pieces that finally began forming a clear picture. The correspondence made it clear, unless payment was received within 60 days of their final notice, Clearwater would cancel our lake access. I'm no legal expert, but when every page screams "overdue" in red ink, even a kid could see our HOA was headed for serious legal fallout. The real shock came when I dug into the actual contract between the HOA and Clearwater. The terms spelled it out plainly. If payments were more than 90 days late, the company had the right to revoke community access and sign a deal with someone else. We were already past that deadline, and Gloria had never breathed a word of this looming crisis to the residents who relied on her leadership. When Rachel returned from her evening walk, she found me surrounded by documents. "What's your plan?" she asked, noticing the determined look on my face. I explained the debt and showed her the certified letters. Her reaction was instant. "Are we raising our son in the middle of a nightmare? What if there's a way to fix this?" Her words lit a spark I hadn't considered before. I opened my bank account and stared at the inheritance money left by my grandmother 3 months earlier. She had always urged me to use my resources wisely and to defend what was right. The $15,000 needed to wipe out the HOA's debt was a lot, but it was money I could part with if it meant protecting my family from further harassment. Still, I couldn't shake the thought that I might be crazy to even consider sinking my inheritance into this mess, but the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. If I covered the debt to Clearwater, I might be able to negotiate protections for my family against Gloria's arbitrary crackdowns. At the very least, it would give me leverage in future conflicts and allow Noah to enjoy fishing without fear of another traumatic run-in with authority. I spent the next hour studying HOA, laws and property regulations, trying to map out my options. The legal maze was complicated, but one truth stood out. Whoever controlled the relationship with Clearwater controlled lake access and usage. That leverage could change everything. Rachel sat beside me, poring over the paperwork. "Justin, if Gloria's been hiding this, what else is she covering up? And even if you pay this off, how do we know she won't invent new problems for us?" Her questions were fair, and ones I had to weigh before making such a commitment. My grandmother's inheritance had come with a handwritten note telling me to use it for something meaningful, something that protected the people I loved. At first, I assumed she meant college funds or home projects. Now, I wondered if this exact battle was what she had in mind when she urged me to stand up for family values. I reached out to my friend Mike, a lawyer, to ask about the risks of paying someone else's debt in return for contractual protections. He cautioned me about the legal complexity, but admitted that if I could negotiate favorable terms with Clearwater, it might shield us from future HOA harassment. He even offered to review any contracts before I signed, which gave me confidence to move forward. As I organized the documents into a timeline, Gloria's behavior grew more damning. She had been collecting homeowner fees while neglecting critical payments, then doubling down on strict enforcement to maintain control. That $600 fine she slapped on me now looked like a distraction from the much bigger financial disaster she'd created. Rachel studied the bank statements and letters again before making up her mind. If we sit back, Gloria will keep targeting families like ours while covering up the real crisis. Maybe paying this debt isn't just about Noah. Maybe it's about saving the whole community from her corruption and incompetence. The last piece of proof came when I searched public records of HOA meetings and financial disclosures. Gloria had never reported the Clearwater debt in any of the required quarterly reviews, a direct violation of her fiduciary duty. That gave me even more leverage if I decided to confront her. By midnight, I had the full picture of the financial crisis Gloria had been hiding. The $15,000 owed to Clearwater was only the beginning. If they terminated the lake contract, property values would nosedive and families would lose one of the neighborhood's key amenities. When I thought of Noah's terrified face from earlier that day, my resolve hardened. Gloria had traumatized my son while concealing financial problems that threatened the entire neighborhood. Maybe it was time for someone with resources to step in and stop her. I realized then, the debt wasn't just a liability, it could be a weapon. 2 days later, Gloria called an emergency HOA meeting. The community center was packed tighter than I'd ever seen. She had prepared a dramatic presentation, complete with enlarged photos of me in fishing shorts by the lake, displayed like evidence in a courtroom. The moment I saw them, I knew this wasn't going to be a rational discussion about community rules. Gloria stood at the front in a Navy power suit, wielding a laser pointer like a corporate executive. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're here tonight to confront a serious threat to our community standards," she declared with the solemnity of a national address. This individual believes he can flout our regulations without consequence, setting a dangerous precedent for lawlessness in our peaceful neighborhood. She clicked through the slides, pointing at the images like a prosecutor before a jury. Each photo had been carefully cropped to look more incriminating than the innocent scene of me teaching Noah to cast his line. Here we see the offender ignoring quiet hours, engaging in banned activities, and showing blatant disregard for the rights of hardworking residents who deserve peace in their mornings. If this counted as criminal behavior, then half the state deserved jail time, I thought, watching Gloria's over-the-top performance. Treating a simple father and son fishing trip like some serious offense would have been laughable if it weren't. So unsettling. A few neighbors squirmed in their chairs, clearly wondering if this level of theatrics was really justified for such a small timing infraction. Rachel sat quietly at the meeting, taking careful notes while Gloria pressed on with her dramatic presentation. When the floor opened for questions, Rachel asked about special lake maintenance fees, quickly uncovering that only certain households had been billed, while others, including ours, never received any notice of these so-called mandatory charges. Has anyone else noticed inconsistencies in how the HOA communicates? Rachel asked innocently, sparking a wave of residents comparing experiences. A troubling pattern came to light. Families with kids were bombarded with violation notices and steeper fines, while older residents without pets or outdoor activities almost never faced enforcement. Gloria brushed aside these observations, insisting some households simply required closer oversight because of their lifestyle choices and level of community involvement. Mrs. Chen, an elderly neighbor by the lake, raised her hand with visible confusion. "Gloria, I've walked by that water every morning for 5 years and never once got a citation for quiet hour violations," she said in a shaky voice. "So why is fishing treated differently than walking?" Both used the lake at the same times. Her question laid bare the arbitrary nature of Gloria's priorities. Gloria's cheeks turned red as she scrambled for a defense. "Different activities carry different risks to community harmony," she said vaguely, gesturing with her laser pointer. "We assess each situation based on how it might affect neighborhood peace and property values." The non-answer satisfied no one. Whispers spread across the room as skepticism grew. Then young Mr. Rodriguez, our neighbor across the street, rose to speak. "Since we're on the subject of property values," he began pointedly, "could you update us on the community amenities budget? Neighbors have been asking about the lake management contract and whether our fees are being properly spent." Gloria visibly tensed. "Our financial records are available during business hours," she snapped. "Tonight's meeting is about violations and standards, not accounting." But the damage was done. Residents demanded details about maintenance costs and wondered aloud why financial updates had been missing. I stood slowly, every eye on me as silence filled the room. "Gloria, you might want to confirm who actually funds this lake before making legal threats," I said evenly, letting the weight of my words linger. The statement was deliberately vague, but carried enough edge to make her falter. "If your own face were plastered on posters at a public trial, would you sit quietly or fight back? Think about it." The room froze. Some leaned forward with curiosity. Others traded loaded glances that hinted at long-held doubts about HOA finances. Gloria's confidence cracked as she realized I might know more about the books than she'd assumed. "Mr. Bennett, your personal finances have no bearing on community rules," she said defensively. But her voice had lost its earlier authority. "Every resident is subject to the same standards," her nerves showed. Rachel pressed on, quietly asking more neighbors about their experiences. The emerging picture was worse than I expected. Families had received contradictory notices, and some had been shut out of key conversations about improvements and financial planning. The meeting unraveled. Arguments erupted between residents, who supported Gloria's strict enforcement and those fed up with her lack of transparency. Families with children were especially worried about arbitrary punishments, while older neighbors voiced concerns over potential financial mismanagement. Finally, George Miller, our longtime neighbor of more than 2 decades, spoke with the steady authority of experience. "In all my years here, I've never seen this kind of conflict over such trivial issues," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. Something has changed in how this HOA runs, and not for the better. We need to focus on real community. Problems again. As the meeting spiraled further out of control, it became obvious Gloria had misjudged the neighborhood's tolerance for her dramatic tactics. What she meant as a public shaming of my family had instead cracked open deeper frustrations about her leadership and financial handling. The night ended with more questions than answers. Afterward, several neighbors approached Rachel and me, sharing their own stories of harassment and inconsistent enforcement. It was clear our phishing citation wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a larger pattern of arbitrary authority and questionable financial practices tearing the community apart. I felt cornered, but maybe this was the exact moment to strike. The next morning, I drove to Clearwater Lake Management Headquarters, determined to act before Gloria caused more damage. The representative who greeted me was skeptical when I asked about the HOA's debt. "Are you authorized to speak on behalf of the association?" he asked. I explained I was just a resident with potential solutions. His suspicion shifted to cautious curiosity. At first, he hesitated to share financial details with someone outside the board, but when I mentioned my grandmother's inheritance and my journalism savings, his demeanor changed. "Most people who call about HOA debt want payment plans or extensions," he admitted, surprised. "It's rare to meet someone who could actually pay it off." He explained they had been warning the HOA for months with certified letters. Gloria had kept promising payments while threatening lawsuits if they canceled the contract. "Honestly, we're tired of their broken promises and legal threats," he said with frustration. "If you can clear the debt, we'll give you exclusive authority over lake access." After consulting an attorney, I confirmed that paying another organization's debt in exchange for contractual rights was entirely legal under state property law. My lawyer cautioned me about risks, but agreed that if I secured favorable terms, it could permanently shield us from future HOA harassment. The negotiations dragged on for 3 hours, carefully outlining responsibilities, protections, and long-term consequences for both sides. Clearwater was eager to put the debt issue behind them and work with someone who actually handled payments responsibly. I offered to clear the entire $15,000 balance in exchange for a 99-year exclusive contract, giving me legal control over the lake, authority over all access and usage rules, handing over my grandmother's savings for a late contract. Was I rescuing us or sinking money into the depths? "This is exactly the solution we've been waiting for," the Clearwater representative said as we went over the agreement. "A reliable party who respects financial obligations and understands community management." The deal would hand full control of lake access from the HOA directly to me. While I sat in Clearwater's office finalizing paperwork, Gloria was escalating her campaign against my family in ways that crossed into illegality. She forged official-looking prohibition notices with fake government seals and produced fraudulent maintenance invoices, claiming she had federal backing to charge extra fees. The documents looked authentic to the untrained eye, but they were riddled with legal errors. Neighbors later told me they had actually seen Gloria herself posting these fake bans and invoices on bulletin boards around the lake. She was telling anyone who'd listen that federal authorities had confirmed my supposed violations, permanently restricted my family's lake rights, and authorized her to collect emergency fees from select households. The fraud was reckless and desperate. Meanwhile, Clearwater reviewed my financial records and confirmed I could settle the debt instantly by wire transfer. "We'll process this today," the representative assured me, "and have your exclusive management contract ready by tomorrow. You'll have full legal authority to restrict anyone disturbing the lake's peaceful use, including HOA board members who misuse their positions." When I got home, Rachel showed me photos of Gloria's fake notices and invoices that neighbors had forwarded to her. They bore forged federal seals and signatures, crimes that could trigger serious charges if authorities were notified. "She's completely lost control if she's resorting to federal crimes to cling to power," Rachel remarked. The fakes quickly backfired when neighbors with legal expertise examined them and spotted clear signs of forgery. Word spread fast that Gloria had been posting counterfeit government papers and pocketing money through phony invoices, raising grave doubts about her judgment and respect for the law. That evening, Clearwater called to confirm my payment had gone through, and the HOA's debt was cleared. Congratulations, Mr. Bennett, the representative said. You now hold exclusive lake management rights for the next 99 years. We'll send the signed contract and full documentation of past HOA violations. Should I reveal the contract immediately or wait for Gloria to dig herself in deeper? What would you do? Rachel and I celebrated quietly that night, knowing the neighborhood power dynamic had shifted permanently. Noah was still shaken from the police incident and too young to grasp the legal nuances, but he relaxed once he realized no one could stop him from fishing anymore. The next step was unveiling my new authority to Gloria and the community in a way that maximized its impact while minimizing backlash. I wanted her to realize her harassment had collapsed, but I also had to shield my family from whatever desperate tricks she might try once she saw her power slipping away. Timing would be everything for maximum effect. I could let her escalate. Further, then present my contract at the perfect moment to completely erase her credibility. Would you stake $15,000 on a battle like this? Now I held the one card she never expected. The question was when to play it. Over the next week, Gloria doubled down, staging daily confrontations and urging neighbors to shun us. Every morning she stationed herself at the lake entrance with a clipboard recording our comings and goings and snapping photos of Noah whenever he stepped outside. The harassment reached a breaking point when Noah came home from school with "Lake Thief" scrawled across his backpack, graffiti from classmates who'd overheard their parents repeating Gloria's accusations. Seeing my son branded like that made me want to storm straight to Gloria's door, but Rachel grabbed my arm, reminding me that losing my temper would only fuel Gloria's campaign. Apparently, community standards now included vandalizing a child's school bag. "Dad, why do the other kids think I'm a criminal?" Noah asked through tears as we scrubbed marker off his backpack. Rachel soon uncovered more disturbing evidence: bogus invoices for lake maintenance fees with forged signatures that didn't match any real resident records. Gloria had been charging selected households for emergency repairs and water quality projects that never happened. A clear pattern emerged when Rachel compared notes with neighbors. Families with young children were billed inflated rates for access, while older residents, especially her allies, paid little or nothing. One elderly neighbor confided she had paid over $800 in these supposed fees during the past year, yet hadn't seen a single sign of actual maintenance around the lake. In one heated encounter, Gloria cornered Rachel at the grocery store, loudly accusing our family of destroying community harmony with our entitlement. Waving papers around the produce aisle, she claimed, federal investigators had deemed us a threat to children and property values. "Families like yours don't understand community standards," she announced for nearby shoppers to hear. The stress weighed heavily on Noah. He developed anxiety about leaving the house and nightmares about police coming to take us away. One night, Rachel found him crying in his room, convinced Gloria's threats would tear our family apart. "What if they really take you and Dad?" he sobbed. The fact that a 12-year-old boy was losing sleep over neighborhood politics showed just how toxic things had become. At this point, would you report her to federal authorities or wait? I knew Gloria's fake prohibition orders were federal crimes carrying steep penalties, enough to end her campaign permanently. The forged seals and signatures were clear evidence I could take to investigators, but timing the exposure was key. Rachel's deeper digging revealed that Gloria had siphoned more than $25,000 from residents through her fake maintenance assessments. The money had gone into her personal account, not any HOA fund, making it outright embezzlement on top of forgery. We now had proof of multiple felonies that could obliterate Gloria's reputation once and for all. The breaking point arrived when Gloria organized a group of supporters to demonstrate in front of our home. They carried signs declaring, "Protect our children from lake violators and community standards matter." She even urged neighbors to honk as they drove by, turning our street into a constant barrage of noise that robbed our family of peace. The irony was almost unbearable. While claiming to uphold community rules, she was blatantly breaking noise ordinances herself. Then Noah's teacher phoned, concerned about his slipping performance and visible distress. "He seems anxious and distracted in class," she said gently. "Is there something happening at home the school should be aware of?" That call was the moment it hit me. Gloria's crusade wasn't just harassment anymore. It was affecting Noah's education and emotional health. We couldn't let this continue. Rachel reached her breaking point soon after, breaking down in tears while watching Noah struggle over his homework. The unrelenting pressure was too much. "I can't stand by while she destroys our child's sense of safety and belonging," she sobbed. "If this doesn't stop, the damage could be permanent." Seeing both my wife and son suffering because of one woman's obsession fueled my resolve to fight back with everything I had. During another heated encounter at the community mailboxes, Gloria waved her counterfeit prohibition notices and threatened that federal marshals would come to remove us. "These documents authorize me to enforce compliance," she declared theatrically. But when I looked closely at her so-called government paperwork, the flaws in the seals were glaring. Any real agent would spot the forgeries instantly. The neighborhood itself was splitting apart. Some residents sided with Gloria's supposed enforcement, while others began to question her tactics. Quietly, several families came forward to tell us about her bogus fines and harassment, revealing that her abuses stretched far beyond our fishing citation. George Miller, our elderly neighbor, had seen one of her public confrontations with us. He shook his head in disgust and muttered, "This is not the kind of leadership our community needs." That night, Rachel and I agreed it was time to involve the authorities. We reported Gloria's forged documents to federal officials and brought her fraudulent billing practices to the district attorney. The evidence was overwhelming: fake seals, falsified invoices, misused funds, and a deliberate pattern of targeting families with children. Something big was about to happen, and I knew it wasn't going to come from her side. Instead of another public spectacle, I arranged a private meeting at the lake with several neighbors as witnesses, including George. I came prepared, carrying copies of my Clearwater contract in a manila folder, ready to reveal my exclusive lake rights at the right moment. The morning was crisp, birdsong filling the air as if nature itself was mocking Gloria's claims about community disruption. She showed up in her signature navy blazer, clutching yet another stack of forged orders, fully expecting to continue her intimidation campaign. With her were two loyal supporters, including the neighbor who had once live-streamed our fishing. Citation: "Mr. Bennett, you're violating federal restrictions on lake access," she proclaimed loudly, brandishing her fake papers. I stayed composed as she launched into her usual dramatic lecture about community standards. But when she caught sight of the Clearwater letterhead, she lunged at my folder, scattering papers while waving her own counterfeit notices in a panic. "Those documents don't override federal authority," she cried, clearly sensing the balance had shifted. At that moment, George calmly stepped forward with his own manila folder. "Gloria, I think the community deserves to know about your special assessment collections," he said evenly, revealing bank records and sworn resident statements. His steady manner stood in sharp contrast to her frantic denials. She tried to dismiss it all as private HOA business, but her voice had lost its power. George laid everything out: fake invoices, payments funneled into her personal account, testimonies from neighbors who had been charged thousands for non-existent maintenance. Phones came out as residents began recording the entire scene. The surreal moment arrived when Clearwater representatives showed up alongside federal investigators. They had come in response to my complaint about Gloria's forgeries and embezzlement. "We're here to investigate reports of fraudulent federal documents and financial crimes," the lead investigator announced, flashing credentials. Gloria's face drained of color as the agents examined her counterfeit orders. "These documents claim federal authority that does not exist," one investigator noted, pointing out the obvious fake seals. "Producing false federal documents is a serious felony." He photographed every forged page while Gloria stood frozen. Clearwater staff then revealed that she had ignored 12 certified warning letters over the past 6 months while still collecting resident payments. "We have records showing the HOA stopped paying us in January," their spokesman explained. Yet Ms. Hale continued billing residents, collecting over $25,000 for services never provided. Gloria stammered, "That's not possible." But her words rang hollow against the mountain of proof. The investigator documented every forgery, noting the counterfeit seals and improper formatting. Then Mrs. Chen, an elderly resident who walked the lake daily, approached the officials with her own story. Gloria never fined me for quiet hour violations, but she charged my neighbor $300 for the exact same thing, she said firmly. Her testimony exposed the discriminatory nature of Gloria's so-called enforcement. I then produced my authentic Clearwater contract. I hold legal authority to manage this lake and to remove anyone who disrupts it, including you, I said evenly. The exclusive 99-year agreement gave me full control, a power I had secured by paying off the HOA's $15,000 debt to Clearwater. Gloria's grip on the community was officially broken. Her supporters quickly began backing away. The neighbor who had live-streamed our citation deleted his posts and offered an embarrassed apology. I had no idea she was using forged documents, he admitted. The federal investigators interviewed multiple residents, uncovering a clear pattern. Families with children were her primary targets, while older neighbors who rarely challenged authority were spared. This appears to be a coordinated fraud scheme with discriminatory enforcement, the lead agent concluded. George then revealed he had been quietly gathering evidence for months, ever since witnessing her harass several families. She fined some residents hundreds for imaginary violations while letting her friends off scot-free, he testified. It became unmistakably clear. This was never about protecting the community, but about power and profit. As the federal agents pressed on with their inquiry, Gloria made one last desperate attempt to cling to control, threatening lawsuits against everyone who had witnessed her downfall. She was yelling about federal lawsuits while standing right in front of actual federal officers. "You'll all be charged for interfering with enforcement," she screamed, though her threats came across as absurd. The investigator calmly told her that she was the one under federal investigation for document forgery and fraud. Representatives from Clearwater confirmed that my exclusive management contract was fully valid, giving me wide authority over lake policies. That meant I, Mr. Bennett, now had the legal right to block disruptive people from lake access and to set reasonable usage rules. They also announced that the old HOA agreement had been terminated because of unpaid dues and breaches of contract. At that point, several residents who had stayed quiet during Gloria's reign finally spoke up. They shared how she arbitrarily enforced rules and made unreasonable financial demands. Their testimony revealed a pattern of abuse meant to personally enrich Gloria while frightening families who dared question her. She thrived on creating fear. That silenced dissent. One neighbor described how Gloria stormed away, still shouting about lawsuits, as investigators inspected her forged documents. Her dramatic departure only made it clear she had lost control. "Ma'am, you need to remain available for questioning," the investigator called after her. But she kept walking, refusing to face reality. She thought she had the upper hand. She didn't know I hadn't shown all my cards yet. 3 weeks later, I sat in a courtroom as Gloria's lawyer argued that my agreement should be thrown out. The judge reviewed everything, Clearwater's documents, along with the federal investigators, findings of fraud and embezzlement. Gloria sat at the defendant's table, no longer in her navy blazer, but in an orange jumpsuit. The fall from powerful HOA president to disgraced federal defendant was complete and deeply satisfying. The judge, without hesitation, upheld my contract granting control of the lake. The evidence of Gloria's crimes and forgeries was overwhelming. This agreement was signed in good faith by Mr. Bennett, who paid off large debts the defendant had hidden from residents, the judge stated firmly. There is no basis for invalidation given the defendant's fraudulent behavior and violation of her fiduciary duty. Gloria was ordered to repay $25,000 to the residents she defrauded and sentenced to 2 years of probation for document fraud. Additional charges for embezzlement and conspiracy were still under investigation as authorities combed through her finances. The defendant systematically exploited her position of trust for personal gain while falsifying documents to hold onto unlawful authority, the judge remarked during sentencing. The federal prosecutor then presented evidence showing that Clearwater was eager to sell. After years of HOA payment disputes and Gloria's endless lawsuit threats, they were done. "We'd prefer working with a reliable private owner than another dysfunctional HOA," the company's president said during negotiations. The purchase price came to $45,000, $15,000 below the $60,000 market value, because Clearwater was relieved to finally have a trustworthy buyer. They once fined me $600 for fishing, and my response was to buy their entire lake. You've already shown financial responsibility and management ability, they told me. We're confident. The lake will be cared for under your ownership. The community quickly held a vote to dissolve the HOA, since Gloria's crimes had shattered any remaining faith in it. Residents were sick of her corruption and wanted a fresh start. We need to move on and build something better, George Miller said during the discussion. The measure passed overwhelmingly. All the HOA signs were removed from the neighborhood entrance, replaced with simple community guidelines decided by resident consensus. The new rules focused on real concerns, safety and property upkeep, instead of lifestyle micromanagement. We can handle things ourselves without giving one person absolute control, Mrs. Chen said, as we cleared away Gloria's oppressive notices. Noah was hesitant to fish again, still shaken by the harassment and the police encounter Gloria caused. What if someone else tries to stop us? He asked nervously as we walked to the water. I reassured him no one could interfere anymore. We owned the lake and the land around it. Rachel finally relaxed for the first time in months, relieved the legal battles were behind us and the harassment was over. I can't believe a $600 fine turned into us owning the whole lake, she said in amazement. Gloria's attempt to destroy us had given us everything she thought was hers. The irony was sweet and satisfying for everyone who had endured her. I put up signs declaring the property private, banning HOA access permanently. Each included contact info for reporting trespassers and emphasized that fishing was welcome for authorized users. Noah helped me install them, finally realizing he could enjoy his favorite hobby without fear of harassment. Families who had also suffered under Gloria asked for permission to use the lake. I set fair rules focused on safety and protecting the environment, never on discriminatory restrictions. Everyone deserves peaceful recreation without intimidation, I explained to neighbors who had been targeted by Gloria, especially families with children. Our new approach fostered cooperation and community spirit, something impossible under her heavy-handed control. Parents could relax, kids could play, and nobody worried about arbitrary fines or fake charges. An elderly neighbor scammed by Gloria's fake assessments received a full refund through restitution. I never thought I'd see that money again, she said with gratitude. Having someone honest in charge changes everything. That financial justice gave closure to victims and made it clear that accountability mattered. George Miller, naturally, became the community coordinator, resolving small disputes with conversation rather than threats. Most problems can be solved with respect and communication, he said wisely. Gloria's approach of fines and intimidation only made things worse. His guidance helped create a healthier neighborhood culture. One calm Sunday evening, Noah reeled in his first base while Rachel watched from our dock. The setting sun reflected off the water, reminding me why we had fought so hard to preserve our right to enjoy it. Dad, this is the best fishing spot ever, Noah said, smiling with real joy. His earlier trauma was finally replaced by happy memories. From a $600 fine, Gloria ended up losing both the lake and her freedom, while I gained something I never expected, a private lake where no one could ever bother my family again, unless the fish filed a lawsuit. Looking back, they tried to bleed me for $600. I responded by paying off $15,000, exposing their fraud and taking the entire lake. Maybe the real lesson is this: when people twist the rules, the only way to win is to flip the board. If you're still here, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like to support QA Stories, you can hit that little thanks button below. Until next time, keep your waters calm and your neighbors honest. Thanks for watching QA Stories. Share this with someone who enjoys a good plot twist, and don't forget to subscribe.